Your mother died giving birth, they said all my life. Until a lawyer handed me her letter, dated last year. I was 32 years old when I found out my mother never died. Everything before that moment. The funerals, the quiet condolences, the way Dad would get this distant look in his eyes every time her name came up. All of it felt like a lie unraveling at the seams. Because it was. The letter came in a nondescript envelope. My name scrawled across it in tight, careful handwriting. I wouldn't have opened it if it wasn't for the law firm's seal embossed on the back. I thought maybe it was something to do with the business I co-owned with my uncle. Instead, it began with 4 words that made my whole world tilt sideways. My dearest Michael, I'm alive. I remember reading it in my truck, parked outside the grocery store. Engine still running. The air conditioning blowing straight into my face, but I was sweating. I read that first line 5 times. Then again, slower. My dearest Michael, I'm alive. And then I saw the name signed at the bottom, Lillian Wexler. My mother. It was her. It had to be. Because there were things in that letter, specific things, only she could have known. The stuffed bear she named Cooper that I used to clutch in preschool. The song she sang to me every night before bed. How I once got lost at the county fair, and she found me near the cotton candy stand, crying into a red balloon. She wrote about how she watched me grow up from afar. How she knew about my graduation, my football scholarship, even the accident that wrecked my knee and sent me home for good. She mentioned the scar I have above my eyebrow. Said she still had the photo of me holding my first fish, grinning ear to ear. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Because if she was alive, who the hell buried that casket? I called the number the lawyer included. Shaking so bad I dropped the phone twice. His name was Derek Stein. He said he represented a private client who had left strict instructions. The letter was to be delivered to me after my 32nd birthday, no sooner. He wouldn't say much else. Just that the client, my mother, was now ready. Ready for what? I asked. He said, to talk. I don't know how I made it home that night. I drove on autopilot, letter clutched in one hand. Windows rolled down like I needed real air. The sun was setting, casting long, golden lines across the road. But nothing felt real. My dad was sitting on the porch when I got home. He looked up from his drink, squinting against the light. You okay, kid? You look like you saw a ghost. I stared at him. I opened my mouth. Closed it. He took a sip of his whiskey, waiting. Why did you lie to me? I finally said. He froze. The glass halfway to his lips. What? She's alive, Dad. Mom. Lillian. She's alive. It was like someone pulled the gravity out of the air. His hand shook. The glass clinked against his teeth before he set it down hard on the table. Where did you hear that? I held up the letter. He stared at it like it might catch fire. I asked you a question, I said. Why did you lie to me for 32 years? He didn't answer. Just looked away, jaw tight, like he was holding something inside with both fists. That's when Uncle Rob stepped out of the house. He saw us, felt the tension, and asked what was going on. I didn't even look at him. I just asked again. She's alive, isn't she? Neither of them said a word. I walked past them both. Into the house. I needed to see something. Anything. Some photo, some certificate. Proof of the funeral I'd barely remembered. I tore through Dad's old files, opened the chest where he kept his important papers. And I found it. A death certificate. Issued in 1993. But the hospital name was wrong. The time of death was blank. And the signature line, where the doctor's name should have been, was typed, not signed. It was fake. All of it. I walked back outside and held it in front of their faces. What else is fake, huh? Did you even bury anyone? Was there a body in that casket, or did you just throw dirt over some rocks and call it grief? Dad stood up. Michael, listen. No, you listen. I spent my whole life thinking I was motherless. You let me believe she died giving birth to me, that I killed her. You let me carry that. Uncle Rob stepped forward, hands out. It wasn't your dad's choice. I turned on him. Then whose was it? He hesitated, looked at Dad. Tell him, Dad said. His voice was hoarse. Uncle Rob looked like he'd aged 10 years in a minute. It was your grandfather's call. Your mom. She didn't leave. She was taken. The world stopped moving. Taken? What the hell are you talking about? And then came the words that would change everything. Your grandfather had her committed, Michael. 2 days after you were born. I sat down on the porch step because my legs couldn't hold me anymore. Committed to what? A private psychiatric facility. In Oregon. I stared at them both. Felt my stomach twist. And she's been there. This whole time? Dad nodded. She got out 3 years ago. 3 years. And no one told me? No one said a word. I looked down at the letter in my hand, and I realized this was only the beginning. I didn't sleep that night. I tried. God knows I tried. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. Except I didn't even know what she looked like anymore. Not really. I was barely 2 days old when she was taken. Every image I had of her was borrowed, secondhand, shaped by old photos and the way Dad used to talk about her before he stopped mentioning her at all. And now I knew why. Shame is a heavy thing. It doesn't just sit on your shoulders. It seeps into your bones. I sat on my bedroom floor, the letter open in my lap, reading it over and over like it was scripture. Every line pulled me deeper into the kind of truth that feels like drowning. She hadn't been sick. Not in the way they told me. She'd had postpartum psychosis. That's what she wrote in the letter. She said the first week after I was born, she started hearing voices, seeing things that weren't there. She told Dad something was wrong, begged for help. Instead, my grandfather stepped in. He was a respected judge in our town, known for being stern, traditional, and obsessed with appearances. And he made the call, had her committed, told the doctors not to release her without his written approval, told my father to mourn her quietly, told the town she'd passed from complications during labor. And the town believed him, because who would question the word of Judge Wexler? I guess Dad was too weak, or too scared, to fight him. And Uncle Rob? He was just a kid back then, still living under my grandfather's roof. So they buried a lie instead of a woman. And she spent the next 29 years locked behind walls, drugged and silenced. I couldn't stop shaking. I called Derek Stein again the next morning. Is she safe? I asked. My voice came out like sandpaper. Yes, he said. She's been out for a few years now. She lives alone. Quietly. She's been recovering. I asked for an address. He hesitated. She wanted to give you space. She wasn't sure if you'd want to see her. I want to see her. There was a long pause. Then he gave it to me. She lived in Oregon, a small town near the coast, 3 hours from the facility. I packed a bag that night. Didn't tell Dad. Didn't tell Uncle Rob. I just left, got in my truck and drove. It took 2 days to get there. I barely ate, barely slept. Just drove and thought and reread that letter until the paper started to fray at the corners. Her house was small, white paint peeling in places, a porch swing that creaked in the breeze. There were wildflowers growing along the edge of the yard, like she'd planted them with no plan, just hope. I stood at her gate for a long time. Then I walked up the path, knocked on the door, and waited. I heard soft footsteps. The door opened, and there she was, Lillian Wexler, my mother, older than the pictures, thinner too. Her hair was mostly gray, pulled back in a loose braid. She wore a faded cardigan over a simple dress. No makeup, no pretense. Her eyes locked on mine, and I knew, instantly, she was my mother. She raised a hand to her mouth. Her eyes welled up. Michael. My throat closed. I nodded, and then she did something I never expected. She stepped back, opened the door wider, and said, "Come in, sweetheart. I made tea." She poured the tea like it was any normal Sunday. Chamomile. 2 mugs. No sugar. Her hands trembled, just a little, but she kept them steady enough to not spill. The kitchen smelled like lemons and something faintly burnt, maybe toast from earlier. The place was old but warm, lived in, and I had no idea what to say. So I just sat there, at her tiny table, staring into a mug I didn't want, trying to understand how I was supposed to bridge 32 years of silence with a woman who should have been a ghost. She was the first to speak. "I didn't know if you'd come." I swallowed. My throat still felt raw. I wasn't sure either. She nodded, eyes cast downward. "You look just like your father. But your voice is mine." I didn't know what to say to that. We sat in silence for a while, long enough for the tea to go cold. Then she said it. "I remember the moment they took me." My chest tightened. "It was raining. I was holding you. I'd just gotten you to sleep. And then the door opened, and it was your grandfather and 2 men in uniforms. Not police, private. They told me I was unwell, that they were taking me to rest." Her voice cracked. She blinked fast. I begged your father to say something. But he just stood there, holding the wall like it was the only thing keeping him upright. I wanted to scream, punch a wall, something. But I just said, "I thought you were dead." She nodded. That was the plan. Judge Wexler couldn't have a daughter in a mental institution. He said it would destroy the family name. So he erased me. You were sick. Yes, I was. I needed help. But not like that. I didn't need to be sedated for decades. I didn't need to be told I didn't exist. I looked at her, at the lines in her face, the grief etched into every crease. What was it like? She closed her eyes. It was white. Always white. White walls, white sheets, white lights. It felt like being erased in slow motion. They kept me on lithium for years. I don't even remember the first 5. I felt like I was floating outside my body. None of this made sense. And yet, it made too much sense. Why now? Why wait until I was 32? She opened her eyes and looked at me. Because I wasn't ready before. And because I wanted you to come to me on your own terms. Not because someone told you to. I let that sink in. There was anger in me, sure. But something else, too. Something worse. Grief. All the years I could have had her. The birthdays, the holidays, the scraped knees and heartbreaks she missed. You ever try to escape? She smiled. Wry, bitter. Once. Year 7. I made it 3 miles before they found me in a ditch. That bought me another 18 months in the high-security wing. After that, I stopped trying. I stared at my tea. My hands clenched. He died, you know, I said. Wexler. 2 years ago. She nodded. I read the obituary. They called him a pillar of the community. They always do. He stole your whole life. Yes. I looked up, and Dad let him. She hesitated. Your father was weak. But he loved you. I think he thought he was doing what was best. Bullshit. She didn't argue. Just nodded like she expected that. Why did you send the letter? Her eyes welled up again. Because I couldn't die without hearing your voice. Without knowing what kind of man you became. And because I needed you to know, none of this was your fault. That cracked something open in me. I looked away. Blinked hard. I spent years thinking I killed you. That my birth ended your life. No. Your birth saved it. You gave me something to fight for in there. Even when I had no name. The silence stretched again. Outside, wind rustled the chimes hanging from the porch. Somewhere down the road, a dog barked. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now, I said. You don't have to do anything. Just be here. That's enough. We sat there like that for a long time, drinking cold tea, swimming in 32 years of what-ifs. And then I asked her the question I'd been too afraid to speak. Do you hate him? She didn't answer right away. Some days, she said. But mostly I pity him. A man so afraid of the truth, he built a life on lies. I nodded slowly. Can I come back tomorrow? She reached across the table, took my hand. Please. And for the first time since I opened that letter, I felt like I wasn't alone in the world. The second visit was harder than the first. Because this time, I wasn't running on adrenaline or shock. This time, I had to walk into that house knowing everything I'd lost and everything I still didn't understand. She greeted me with a smile and a hug that lingered just a second too long. It felt unfamiliar. And familiar. Like a song you used to know but can't quite hum. We sat on the porch swing this time. The wind was sharp, but she wrapped herself in a thick shawl and handed me a cup of coffee that smelled like cinnamon. I used to dream about this, she said quietly. Just sitting next to you. Watching the sky. I sipped my coffee. What stopped you from writing sooner? She took a long breath. Fear. Guilt. The weight of time. I didn't think you'd believe me. I'm still not sure I do. She nodded. That's fair. We watched a squirrel dart across the yard and vanish into the brush. I remembered being 5 and watching those little creatures with fascination. I wondered if she ever saw me do that. From afar. Behind fences. Did you ever try to see me? She didn't answer right away. Your grandfather made sure I couldn't. He had friends in law enforcement. In medicine, I was declared legally deceased. There were years I couldn't even get a library card. That hit me like a punch to the ribs. You were buried. Yes, but I wasn't the only one. I looked over. He buried your father, too. Not in a grave, but in fear. He told him I'd never be well. That if he tried to see me, he'd lose custody. I didn't want to feel sympathy for Dad, but it crept in like a tide anyway. Why did he believe him? Because my father controlled everything. And your dad, he was 24, alone, and terrified. So he just gave up? She looked at me then. Her eyes weren't angry, just tired. You weren't easy to raise, you know. You were fierce, stubborn, smart. Every teacher said you asked too many questions. I laughed bitterly. Still do. She smiled. Did he love me? More than anything. But he was broken. And broken men sometimes cling to lies because truth would tear them apart. I looked at my hands. I want to hate him. You're allowed to. But it won't fix what he did. A silence fell between us. This time, it wasn't heavy. Just honest. You said I gave you something to fight for. I said, yes. What else kept you alive? She leaned back. Books. A nurse named Carla. She smuggled in poetry. Letters from women who'd been through the same thing. And one day, she smuggled out a photo of you. I turned to her, startled. She risked her job for that. She said you looked like hope. I swallowed hard. Do you still have it? She reached into her shawl pocket and pulled out a worn, folded photograph. It was me, maybe 9 years old, muddy knees and a crooked smile, holding up a plastic trophy. Field day, I said. I remember this. I won the 3-legged race with Jacob. She smiled. That was the only photo I had of you for 18 years. Something inside me cracked open, and for once, I let it. I took her hand, held it. I don't know how to do this, I whispered. Me neither, she said. But we'll figure it out. The sun dipped lower. The sky flushed pink and orange. There's so much I want to ask. Then stay, she said. Ask it all. I'll tell you everything, even the ugly parts. I want the truth. All of it. She nodded. Then we start with the man who buried me. Your grandfather. And the woman who helped him. Wait, woman. Her eyes darkened. Your grandmother knew. And she didn't just know, she agreed. And just like that, the past got even heavier. The next morning, I went back with a notepad. Not for her. For me. I needed to write it down. Everything. Every name. Every decision. Every thread in this twisted web they'd spun before I was old enough to speak. Because if I didn't, I'd forget something, and I wasn't going to let history erase her twice. She made us oatmeal with brown sugar and walnuts. Told me she used to imagine feeding me this when I was a toddler. That thought nearly ruined my appetite. But I stayed. I listened. Your grandmother was worse than your grandfather in some ways, she said, her voice low. He buried me legally. She buried me emotionally. I blinked. What do you mean? She stood at the foot of my hospital bed the day they transferred me. Told me I was weak. That women in our family didn't lose control. That what I had wasn't an illness, it was shame. That hit harder than I expected. I remembered Nana Wexler well. Polished pearls, a constant frown, and a mouth that could weaponize compliments. Did she ever visit you? She shook her head. Not once. Not even after he died. But she knew you were alive the whole time. Yes. And she told people you were dead. Yes. I wrote that down. Word for word. Why? Because she believed in image. In control. In the lie of perfection. A mentally ill daughter didn't fit into the Wexler legacy. I clenched my pen so hard it nearly cracked. Did she ever talk about me? She hesitated. She told your father once that she prayed you wouldn't turn out like me. The room spun for a second. She said I was unfit. Dangerous. Like I was some kind of curse. My stomach turned. I stayed with her once when Dad had pneumonia. She made me recite Bible verses before bed and told me boys who cried didn't make it to heaven. Her eyes closed. Her hands tightened into fists. I'm so sorry. I wanted to scream. But instead, I flipped the page. Tell me about Carla, the nurse. A small smile returned. She was fire. Puerto Rican, brilliant, didn't take crap from anyone. She called the facility a graveyard with hall passes. She was the first person who believed me. Did she try to get you out? She tried everything. Petitioned doctors, wrote letters. But she wasn't family. And Judge Wexler made sure her voice didn't matter. I wrote her name in all caps, Carla Rodriguez. What happened to her? She was let go? Rumor was she tried to leak records to a journalist. They blacklisted her. I haven't heard from her in years. Would you want to? She nodded slowly. We sat in silence again, and I realized something had shifted. I was no longer just hearing a story. I was becoming part of it. The story of a woman buried alive by the people who should have protected her, and the son who was supposed to never find out. But I had, and I wasn't walking away. Not anymore. What if we went public? I said. She blinked. What? Told the truth. Exposed everything. Named names. Showed the town what really happened. She looked down at her hands. Twisted the wedding ring she still wore. You'd destroy the family name. It was never a name worth saving. She didn't answer, but I saw it in her eyes. Hope. And fear. And something else. Readiness. We weren't there yet, but we were getting close. And for the first time in 3 decades, She didn't look like a ghost. She looked like a woman who had something to say, and I was going to make damn sure the world heard her. It took 3 more visits before she said yes. 3 more days of oatmeal and questions. Of sitting on that porch, listening to the wind, and talking about 30 years like they were still unfolding. And then, on the 4th morning, she handed me a box. "What's this?" "My records," she said. "What I could recover." Carla sent them to me. Inside were copies of intake forms, medication logs, letters she'd written and never mailed. Pages and pages of documentation, some typed, some scrawled in her old, slanted handwriting. "I want to tell my story," she said, "but I want you to help me write it." I swallowed. "You sure? Once we start, there's no putting the lid back on." She nodded. "Let them see what they buried." So we started. I brought my laptop, set it up on her old coffee table. We sat side by side as she began to speak, slow and trembling at first, then stronger with every hour. She told me about the hallucinations, the terror of hearing voices whispering threats that weren't there, the shame of feeling like she was a monster while cradling her newborn son. She told me about the doctors, how some tried to help, and others just wanted her quiet. She told me about the isolation ward, the days she stopped screaming, the way time stretched like taffy in a place with no clocks. I typed everything. Sometimes she cried. Sometimes I did. Once, we both did, and neither of us spoke for 10 minutes. When the chapter on Judge Wexler came up, she paused. "He wasn't always cruel," she said. "He was calculated. That's worse." She looked at me then. "I think part of him believed he was saving the family." "Saving us from what? Truth?" "Yes." I shook my head. "Truth doesn't destroy families. Lies do." That night, I emailed the first 10 pages to an old friend of mine, Jamie Ellis, investigative journalist. We went to college together. She owed me a favor. I didn't tell Mom. Not yet. 2 days later, Jamie called. "Is this real?" she asked. Every word. "I want to meet her. Then come to Oregon." The following week, Jamie flew in. We met her at a diner. My mother wore a yellow blouse I'd never seen before. She looked calm, collected, terrified. Jamie brought a recorder, promised discretion. Mom told her everything, and I watched, amazed, as this woman who once couldn't look at her own reflection spoke like a survivor reclaiming the fire that had been stolen from her. By the time dessert came, Jamie had tears in her eyes. "This story," she said, "it's going to break people." Mom nodded. "Good. They need to be broken, so they don't break someone else." We left the diner in silence. The wind had picked up again, whipping leaves into spirals across the parking lot. "Do you regret it?" I asked her. "What?" Coming forward, letting Jamie record. She took a long breath. "No." Then she turned to me. "But I am scared." I nodded. "That's okay. Courage doesn't exist without fear." We got in the truck. I drove her home. And that night, I watched her sleep on the couch as I sat nearby, still typing. She'd given up 30 years of her life. And now, for the first time, the world was going to hear her scream. Loud and clear. And I would be right beside her when it happened. The story dropped 2 weeks later. Front page of a Sunday feature. Headline in bold. "Buried alive. The judge's daughter who never died." Jamie did her job well. Every quote, every record, every contradiction in the death certificate. She'd spoken to former employees of the facility, reviewed legal filings, and even found a retired doctor who remembered my mother, remembered her being pulled off medications once the Wexlers stopped paying the bills. It spread like wildfire. Social media, podcasts, talk shows. People who remembered my grandfather started asking questions they'd never dared ask before. And then came the backlash. "Why dig up the past? She's probably exaggerating. This is just about revenge." They always come, the doubters, the defenders of legacy. But Mom was ready. She recorded a video, sat in her living room, in front of that old coffee table, with the sunlight catching the edges of her hair. I filmed it. No script, just truth. She told them everything. Her voice didn't shake once. They called me unstable, dangerous, a risk to the family name. But I was just a young mother with an illness. And instead of helping me, they buried me. It went viral. And suddenly, the doubters got quieter. A local attorney reached out, asked if we'd consider pressing charges against the facility, against the county for wrongful commitment. The statute of limitations on some charges had expired, but not all. There was still a path. Mom said no at first. She didn't want a courtroom. until she got a letter. From Carla. It was short. A single page. But it said everything. I never stopped thinking about you. I lost my job, my license. But if you're going to fight, I'll testify. I'll burn the whole system down for you. Mom read it twice. Then looked at me. We sue. It took months. Depositions. Legal filings. I watched her endure it all. Every question that reeked of skepticism. Every lawyer who called her Miss Wexler like she hadn't been someone's mother, someone's prisoner, for 3 decades. And through it all, she never cracked. Not once. I stayed with her the whole time. Flew back and forth when work demanded. Took calls from journalists. Sent copies of her manuscript to publishers. Interest was high. One night, she called me from her porch. I lit a candle for Carla tonight, just in case she needed to see it. You think she will? I think she already has. The trial date approached. And as it did, more women began to come forward. Not about our facility, about others. About husbands, fathers, judges who'd buried them behind titles and white walls. The world didn't change overnight, but it was listening. And sometimes, that's how it starts. With one voice, dragged from the grave, refusing to stay quiet. The courthouse steps were colder than I expected. Mom wore blue that day, a deep navy dress with a silver pin that had belonged to her own mother, back when she was still kind. She held herself like someone stepping out of the shadows for the first time in years. Not a victim, a witness. The courtroom was packed. Press in the back, advocates in the front. And sitting across from us, 3 lawyers in dark suits, representing the county and the now-defunct hospital. It wasn't a criminal trial. Not officially, but it felt like one. Mom took the stand. She told her story the same way she told it to me. Slow, steady, honest. No theatrics. Just pain and precision. She read her intake form aloud. The false diagnoses. The fabricated notes. The absence of consent. The opposing counsel tried to discredit her. Brought up old medical records. Asked why she hadn't escaped sooner. She just looked at them and said, "You don't escape a coffin. You wait to be dug out." Silence. Carla testified by video. Still fire, even from 1,000 miles away. She called it what it was, systemic abuse. Said Mom was sane by year 2, maybe earlier. That she'd begged administrators to reevaluate her. That they'd buried the request. By the end of her statement, 3 jurors were crying. The verdict came 2 days later. Liability, confirmed. Damages, awarded. An 8-figure settlement. Not hush money, justice money. Mom didn't celebrate. She just exhaled, like someone finally letting go of a breath they'd held for half their life. We walked out of the courthouse together. Reporters swarmed. She gave one statement. This isn't about revenge. It's about return. I was taken from my life. Today, I took some of it back. A month later, her book hit shelves. The Woman They Buried. It became a bestseller in 3 weeks. She didn't do book tours. No interviews after the first month. She said her voice had done enough traveling. She bought a bigger house. Nothing extravagant, just a place with a garden and wide windows. She donated most of the settlement. Started a foundation for women wrongly institutionalized. She named it the Carla Fund. We visit each other twice a month. Sometimes more. She's met my friends. My business partners. Even my ex. That was awkward. We're still learning each other. Still stepping over landmines. But it's real now. And one day, I asked her, "Do you forgive them?" She paused. "I forgive the scared ones. Not the cruel ones. Never the ones who knew and still turned away." I nodded. We sat under a tree in her yard, wind rustling through the branches. "You ever wish I hadn't found the letter?" I asked. She looked at me, tears in her eyes, but not falling. "Michael," she said, "that letter didn't save me. You did." And that's when I finally cried. Because for the first time, I wasn't the boy who grew up without a mother. I was the man who helped her come home. A year after the verdict, I got a letter of my own. Handwritten. No return address. Just my name and a familiar looping script. It was from my father. I hadn't seen him since the night I confronted him on the porch. I almost didn't open it. Part of me wanted to burn it, unread. But another part, the part that still remembered being a kid on his shoulders, watching the county fair fireworks, needed to know what he'd say. "Michael, if you're reading this, then you've already learned the truth. There's no defense for what I allowed. Only regret. And cowardice. I told myself for years that I was protecting you. That sparing you the truth about your mother was an act of love. But that was a lie I told myself, so I wouldn't have to face what I did. Your mother deserved better. You both did. I saw your interviews. I watched the trial on TV. You were strong, stronger than I ever was. I wept for what I cost you. I don't expect forgiveness. I won't ask for it. But I needed you to know. I never stopped loving either of you. Tell her I said thank you. For surviving. Tell her I was wrong. Always. Dad. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it, tucked it into a box with my own notes and the original letter from Mom. The one that started it all. I showed it to her a week later. She read it silently, then set it down and poured us both coffee. Do you believe him? I asked. She stirred her mug slowly. I believe he was afraid. And I believe he loved us. But love isn't an excuse. We sat there, sipping coffee in the quiet. After a while, she said, you should write him back, even if you don't send it. I did. That night, I wrote everything I'd wanted to scream. And everything I never said when I was 7, or 16, or 25. But I ended it with this. You were weak, and you let her disappear. But I'm not you, and I won't let her be forgotten again. I didn't send it, but I slept better. 3 months later, we held a memorial. Not for the dead, but for the 30 years stolen. Friends came. Journalists. Women from the foundation. Even Carla showed up, standing tall in the front row. Mom gave a speech. She didn't talk about revenge or blame. She talked about light. About how even the buried bloom again if someone's willing to dig. I stood beside her, my arm around her shoulders. And for the first time in my life, I said the word out loud. Mom. She turned to me, her smile wide. Yes, sweetheart. And I finally said what I should have said decades ago. Welcome home. She took my hand. And just like that, the past loosened its grip. We stepped into the light. Together.